Moving on to stage 2. In the empowerment and resilience structure, that the second stage of treatment is once we've established a good therapeutic relationship and are engaging the feedback-informed therapy, feedback-informed treatment, and beginning to have a good solid therapeutic relationship, and that our clients have some expectancy of good things happening, then we transition into the second stage of treatment. So you've seen the way that I'm doing this is underpinning all of the stuff that is in the empowerment and resilience structure, because feedback-informed therapy won't work without this. That we've got to have the therapeutic relationship, got to take some time on the front end, even if you're doing forward-facing trauma therapy as a standalone and not doing the structure that per se of treating trauma. You still need to have these components before forward-facing trauma therapy will work. So, and this next piece that we're going to do is integral to forward-facing, as it is integral to trauma treatment, as it is the centerpiece for professional resilience. It's really the kind of epicenter of all treatment going forward from here in the 21st century. And that's really what stage 2 is about, really what forward-facing trauma therapy is about on the front end. It's an educational process. And what we're doing is that we're giving the people that we're working with, whether those are clients, whether those are peers, supervisees, whoever it is that we're working with, we are giving them an owner's manual for their autonomic nervous system. And most people don't have owner's manuals for their autonomic nervous system. They don't have an awareness of what's happening with their autonomic nervous system underneath the consciousness. And until you have that awareness, you are destined and conscripted to be a victim of your autonomic nervous system. I work with physicians a lot. I've been consulting with California Emergency Physicians, CP America, for since 2009, helping them to develop resilience, and working with those men and women who are physicians, physicians assistants, and nurse practitioners. They spent 8 years of training, of learning anatomy and physiology. They know everything there is to know about the autonomic nervous system, but they don't know how to live with one. And that's what's causing all their distress, because until you understand what's going on with the autonomic nervous system, the locus of control is external. That all of the problems, all your stress, all of the difficulties are caused by the environment. When you learn about the way the autonomic nervous system responds to perceived threats, then it starts to become an internal locus of control. And that is the magic. That's transformation. That's where things get different. So I want to walk you through that process. And I've spent 20 years doing this, and have got it into a pretty good, I think, artful presentation. I can do it in as short as 15 or 20 minutes. I'm going to spread this out, probably be better part of an hour, that I walk you through how to explain. Hey, I'm going to do it to you, and then you'll be able to take some of this information and begin to craft your own language and match it to language and interactive styles that are better suited for you. So what when I first started doing this, I would learn pieces about, I read Sapolsky, and I read anatomy, a bunch of anatomy and physiology, and began learning more and more and more about autonomic nervous system functioning. And I wanted to teach my clients about it, because the more I learned about it, the more I started getting that you could regulate it. Well, what I found early on was that nobody has much tolerance for somebody professorially telling them about their autonomic nervous system. So what I had to do was I had to build some interactive processes to be able to do this with the folks that I work with. So that's the way that I'm going to do this with you. Now, one last thing before we step into it is if you've taken the trauma competency course, you already know this, but stage 2 is more than just teaching autonomic nervous system functioning and skills building for regulating it. There's a bunch of other stuff that goes in it too that we're not going to be much doing with forward facing, but if you're going to, have a whole suite of skills to work with trauma survivors, then you probably ought to take that course, because in the course we go into all of the processes for doing how to help folks. We'll talk about this in a little bit, but I was at last year. Went to see Bessel van der Kolk do his presentation on his new book, Body Keeps the Score, and he just kind of out of the blue said, "You guys want to know what heals trauma?" And everybody was like, "Yeah, tell us, old great one." and what he said, just kind of off the cuff, he said the 2 things that heal trauma are interoception and self-compassion, and I got teared up. Because I've been talking about interoception for a while, and everybody kind of looked at me like standoffish. So it was really affirming to have the rock star of trauma kind of confirm that. But I was really interested in about self-compassion, and that's intrigued me, and I had never thought of it that way. I mean, you've seen when I did the active ingredients about how important it was to have the repatriating that psychoeducation and cognitive restructuring, and probably the most important cognitive restructuring piece is helping clients because a trauma survivor is polarized and they're in an antagonistic relationship with themselves. Almost all of them have some degree of self-hatred and shame and aggression aimed towards themselves. And part of early treatment is helping them to see that they're not sick, they're not damaged, they're not overwhelmed. I mean, they're not afflicted is the term that I use. They are instead over-adapted. That they have developed capacities that help them to survive the traumas of their lives, but they are continuing to stay in that state of hypervigilance. And to help folks to be able to shift out of this judgment, self-judgment, and shame into beginning to see themselves as resilient, yet overly sensitive to environmental stimuli. Makes them a partner, makes them participating with themselves and beginning to see themselves in a whole different light. And that's another important piece that we're not going to really spend a lot of time doing that in this course. But I would encourage you to look into to our other 3-day course on trauma competency for the 21st century. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about that. I'm going to move forward. And this, you've got the slides. I'm not going to read through those. So I've called this process Tools for Hope. And it is the fulcrum of transformation. This is where people get different, is around this information. This is where you transition out of the problem into the solution. On the front side of this information, your clients are still in the problem. On the back side of what we're going to do when we teach them about the autonomic nervous system and then teach them how to regulate it, you're downhill. You're in the solution. It's black and white. It is clear. You're in a different place after your clients learn this. And it is it's fun, and I don't know what I got system up here for. It probably means something. As you get good at this, it's and it takes some while to get really graceful with it. But you will find that as you get graceful with it, you really love what happens when you teach your clients this stuff. So let's do it. And so the way I start this process, And the way I've always done it is I ask this question. And I do that. I just did it with a group of folks, just recorded last week or so, a couple of weeks ago, with foster parents. And it's so, and I've done it with law enforcement. I've done it with physicians, with mental health professionals, with just kind of all walks, animal care professionals. I ask them, and if I'm doing it in a professional context, I ask them, is your job stressful? If I'm doing it in a clinical context, I ask, is your life stressful? Resilience, is your job stressful? Clinical treatment, is your life stressful? And what answer do I get? Yeah, always the same one. It's like, duh, yes, it's very stressful. And I say, okay. And then I take out my portfolio and I'll draw a line down the center of the page. And on one side of the page, I put causes. And on the other side of the page, get me just over there in the corner. Actually, I want to cut me down to size here for a little bit. I'll bring it back up. So I'm little. And these columns are not filled out, but I went ahead and filled them out just so I wouldn't be typing the whole time that I'm talking. So, and I elicit, and I'm doing this in a training, I elicit from the group. I'm doing this with an individual, I elicit from the individual. And I start with effects. And I say, okay, if your life is stressful, what are some of the negative effects of stress in your life? And these are just common ones. I get different ones, but those are ones that markedly show up. Somatization, fatigue, anxiety, the other end of that, anger, irritability, withdrawal, isolation, sleep problems, relational problems. So all of those things that people attribute to the effects. And then I very carefully, with very explicit language, and I say, and what are the causes of these effects? What are the stressors in your life? And these are the common ones I get. Almost always get finances, job, work, relationships, health, politics, commute, traffic, demands, deadlines, those types of things. I just kind of threw some up there. And then as soon as I get this information from my client, what I do is I flip around the portfolio and I hold it up to them and I say, so you've identified that these are the causes of your stress and these are the effects. Well, what I have to tell you now is that these are not the cause of your stress. And as long as you believe that these are the cause of your stress, then you will continue to have these effects in your life. Matter of fact, the primary reason why you are having these effects is because you mistakenly believe these to be the cause. And here, let me make me bigger now. Here's the look on my clients' faces when I say that. They go, you can just see their face kind of gnarls up and they look at me like this. They're incredulous, which probably some of you watching this are. But another thing is underneath there. And the other thing is a small little kernel of expectancy that I'm going to produce an alternative explanation of what the cause of stress is. Causes of stress is really. And that expectancy gives me enough rope to go hang myself with it. It's engaged them. They're curious. And so this is a gambit to make it personal and to engage instead of just talking at them. And they'll go, and you say, yeah, that's true. May I go forward? And they'll go, yeah, bring it, whatever you got, man. And so the next thing I do, and this is where it gets different. So what would be wonderful is if I could just tell you what the cause of stress is, And that would graft, and we wouldn't have to do any of this. We could just jump right on over the fence. However, what I found with 99% of the people with whom I work, even advanced degree folks, is that there is such a strata of learning history around stress, painful learning, that we have developed a perceptual understanding of stress and its causes that is so stratified. There's so much of this that I can tell you what the cause is. I tell my clients what the cause is, and they go, yeah, right. What else you got? That it doesn't graft. So what I got to do to make this meaningful is I got to do some good cognitive restructuring. I got to start dismantling some of the belief structure around this by psychoeducation, so that a new idea can get grafted. And that's the purpose of this little kind of educational piece. So moving forward, the next thing I ask is this question to my clients. When I'm doing a training, I put this slide up on the board, up on the screen, and I say to my client, are you 100% safe right now? To the room audience, I say, are all of you in this room totally and perfectly 100% safe? Can I see a show of hands of all of you that are totally and perfectly 100% safe? And it is rare that I get a hand. California, sometimes I get a hand. But all over the United States and internationally. Done this in Africa and in Australia and South America, Canada. And I get the same answer, no. And here's where we get different. And I say, for those of you who are not raising your hand, what I have learned from you is that there's a really good chance that your anterior cingulate has atrophied. Everybody kind of looks at me like that when I say that to a client, that your anterior cingulate might be in trouble. And you may want to get that looked after. And they chuckle. And for those of you who are watching this, maybe a few of you have read about the anterior cingulate. It's getting a lot of press. It started with back in the early 90s with some of Daniel Amen and other folks that were doing brain imaging work, began to see that folks who had psychiatric symptoms, had a lot of psychiatric symptoms, a lot of impairment. When they did PET, SPECT, or fMRI scans of the brains, what they found was this little pinky nail size structure that is here. That is, I can't remember if I talked about this or not already, that Bessel talked, when he was doing his presentation, he talked about the mohawk, that, some of the recent studies have been showing that folks who become severely dysregulated lose medial brain structures. And when you lose medial brain structures, you have it is impossible to self-reference. All your attention's on the environment. I think I did say that earlier in this course. And that's one of the structures that jettisons temporarily when a person has a lot of energy in their body when they're perceiving threat. When that happens constantly, person's constantly in their threat response system, then there is diminished volume and diminished electrical activity in this anterior cingulate cortex. Anterior cingulate is part of the gyrus system, and anterior posterior cingulate. You pick up a journal on neuropsych today and just rifle through the table of contents, and almost all of them have something about the gyrus, the anterior posterior cingulate. An article, a lot of research being looked at that, because that's kind of interesting, that folks, that the more symptomatic they are, the more they have diminished functioning of anterior cingulate cortex. Sort of interesting. But what they found in the late 90s and early aughts is, as they continue looking at this, those folks that went through a course of treatment that was effective, that whether that was psychopharmacological treatment or psychotherapeutic treatment or combination of the two, and they reported that their symptoms were diminishing and they were less symptomatic, feeling better. They did an exit scan and they found that the anterior cingulate was restored to normal or better volume, normal or better electrical activity. And that is really interesting. And it is one of the first measures of treatment, of psychotherapeutic treatment, that is not contingent upon patient report. It is a physiological measure. And that's interesting. And it's heralding the direction that our field's going. You know, that was one of the things that also that Bessel said is that, you know, you want to work in trauma, go get neurofeedback certified, because that's what's going to happen. We're not getting less brain-based. We're going to get more and more and more brain-based as time goes on. The reason why, a lot of interesting stuff around this, but for our purposes here today, is as we said previously, the anterior cingulate is your radar system. It is the threat detection that then activates the amygdala, which then creates the threat response. Threat detection system is the anterior cingulate. It's what picks out threats in the environment, identifies. Now, this is theoretical, but the best explanation that is kind of out there right now is this, is that the anterior cingulate is a sensitive structure. When it's working the way that it's supposed to, when it's fully engorged, fully electrically active, when it's normal or better functioning, it allows human beings to do threat detection, to determine whether there is a threat in the environment based upon sensory data, what they see, smell, touch, taste, or hear, on empirical happenings in the environment right now. When it is diminished in its functioning, and as I said, it's a sensitive structure, and when the threat response system is going off, the HPA axis is dumping a bunch of hypothalamus pituitary adrenal, is dumping a bunch of chemicals into the bloodstream, and that continues. And as those chemicals increase, what happens is that those catalytic, catecholamines, cortisol, adrenaline, GABA, glutamate, those are gasoline for the fire of the threat response system, sympathetic nervous system in human beings. And as those chemicals cross the blood-brain barrier, come in contact with the anterior cingulate, it causes that anterior cingulate to diminish in its functioning. As it diminishes, then what happens is more and more and more threat is ascribed to, defined by historical data rather than empirical data. Our history, our painful learning is perceiving something in the environment that is similar to painful past learning and ascribing that thing in the environment as threatening and causing us to perceive threat where there is no danger. So when I do this with clients, what I ask them to do, and when I do this with room full of I want to have you guys do this with me right now. I want to ask you to do something that Fritz Perls, the founder of Gestalt psychotherapy, said a lot. I want to ask you to lose your mind and come to your senses. I'm going to ask you to spend the next 10 seconds of clock time. And I'm going to ask you to look around the room that you're sitting in and identify something that's dangerous in that room. And when I do this in an audience or when I do this with a client, they point at things. They'll point at a light fixture above. And what I do is I go sit under the light fixture and I say, so I'm in danger right now. Is that what you're telling me? And they say, you could be. And I say, I didn't ask you. I could be. I asked you if I am. That light fixture is going to fall someday. It's not staying up there forever. But is it falling right now? As I sit here underneath of that, am I in danger? Could be. Yes, I could be. Am I? Right now. Look at it. It is wholly inert, isn't it? It's not moving. If it were starting to shake and rattle and if plaster was falling out of the ceiling, then yeah, I would be in danger. But right now, sitting underneath of this with the knowledge that it's not going to be up there forever, I'm still perfectly 100% safe right here underneath that. Sometimes they point out an electrical outlet and say, you know, that electrical outlet could catch on fire. And I say, you're absolutely right. Is it on fire right now? If you look at that electrical outlet, it's perfectly inert. All the electricity is contained in the wires, and it's working exactly the way it's supposed to. It is not producing any danger for any of us right now. And then they go, well, they point at me. And I say, yes, I'm absolutely capable of going off on, I can be danger to myself and others. I've proved that in my past. But right now, look at me. In what way am I menacing to you? In what way am I threatening you? Well, you can make me feel things I don't want to feel. You can bring up things that will hurt me. And here's where I got to kind of walk a little bit. I want to push this as far as I can, but not break down the therapeutic relationship. So I wade into the water and I say, you know, there is no such thing as emotional danger. There is for children, but not for adults. For adults, emotions are not dangerous. They're uncomfortable, some of them, but they're not dangerous. You're in no danger when you're embarrassed. You're in no danger when somebody's criticizing you or when you are feeling angry. Behavior, after those feelings, yeah, you could put yourself in danger or somebody else in danger, but just the feelings themselves, they are not dangerous. There is no such thing as emotional danger for adults. And a little footnote here, that's the language of victimhood. I mean, a lot of us have learned that, that there is, you know, that you're an emotionally dangerous person for me. And my bias is that's a victim stance. That whatever it is that I'm feeling, it's not dangerous to me. Whatever it is that you're feeling is not dangerous unless you become so dysregulated that you have physiological damage, but it's not the feeling, it's the perceived threat around the feeling. And you know, a lot of times I just gotta let that go because my clients are so invested in that. And I don't want to ram that down their throat and damage the therapeutic relationship. And I say, okay, well, let's just kind of bracket that for a second and let's move forward. So, and then a lot of times my clients do this. And I go, So when the voices in your head are telling you to pick up that pen and stab yourself in the throat with it, are you in danger? Yes. No, you're not. You're not in any danger until you actually do the thing that the thought is telling you, or whatever else. Perceivedly threatened, yes. Danger, no. You're not in any danger from your thoughts. Your thoughts are digital. And you're not in any danger from your thoughts until you engage the behavior upon those thoughts. And, you know, which one of us in this room right now is engaging dangerous behaviors that are menacing to life or limb right now? Nobody. That's right. So, welcome home. There is no danger in this room. You are perfectly and totally 100% safe right now. And that's, I don't know that there's, moves me. I don't know that there's ever anything else that is going to be more impactful to a trauma survivor. And I don't know that there's very much else I ever get to do. That is that first moment when I get to show my clients that they're safe and watch that and to experience that there is no danger right here. And what you just learned is that your painful past learning is intruding with such intensity and such ferocity into your perceptual framework. And it's causing you to perceive threat here in this environment where there is no danger. That's what trauma does, is it causes you to perceive threat where there is nothing really dangerous. And I just want to invite you to just take a minute and to be and feel what it feels like to be safe. Trauma survivors do not know the difference between being safe and feeling safe. Is that every time that they perceive threat, they believe that they are in danger. They feel scared. There must be something dangerous. That's not even a thought. It's intuitive. They're married. Fear equals danger. And what we've got is an over-adapted client who perceives threat as a way of helping them to survive. Excuse me. They're way overly sensitive to all of those environmental cues where there is no danger. And as a result of that, what's happening is that they're jacked up all the time, is that their autonomic nervous system is keeping them in a state of hypervigilance. I was doing this training, it's been a couple months ago. It was really moving. I was about here somewhere, maybe somewhere in this process, and it was, I don't know, 60 or 70 people in the room. And there was a gentleman in the back of the room that stood up, and he, African-American, late 60s, worked in addiction. Big guy, 6'5", probably 2 1/4, 240 pounds, big dude. And he jumped up and said, "Hypervigilance has kept me alive, MFer." And he said the words. Whew. Pin drop in the room. And I said, "Yeah, it has. I'm glad you survived. But it's getting in your way now. It's causing you a lot of pain now. And I'm hoping that you're willing to walk this through with me because we're going to a different place." And he grumbled and he sat back down. And I continued on with the training. And it's a 2-day training. When I do it for PESI, it's 2 days. And at the end of the second day, everybody else had left and he waited around till the end of the day. And he, everybody else had left, and there was a bunch of people that came up afterwards. So he hung around 20 minutes after the training was over, and he just sat there and he was reading. And after everybody left, he got up and he started walking to me, and I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. And I just kind of like, I regulated myself, and he just kept walking, and he didn't say a word. He just looked me in the eye, and he just walked up to me, and he got within 2 feet of me, and he raised his arms out, and he hugged me. And he said, "Thank you for introducing me to me." That's what this stuff does, man. It's pretty beautiful that he didn't know any of that. And the only tool he had in his toolbox was brute force and trying it through and being constantly on guard. And, we're going to talk here in just a minute about replacing hypervigilance with relaxed vigilance. And he got that. And in a matter of 2 days, he was living a different life. And that's what's so cool about this stuff, man. It's just so cool. So people will not start the process of regulating their autonomic nervous system until I can get them safe. And that's the purpose of this little gambit that we just did, is to make certain that my clients experience in the empirical world, even though they're being intruded upon by painful past learning and they're perceiving threat, what they get is that, boom, right now, there is no danger in this environment. I am perfectly 100% safe, even though I'm still afraid. And now we're on a different vector. It's a different process of the way that we're walking through this person's life and what treatment's going to look like. And the last piece of this is, forget about our clients. This is for us. When a person is perceiving threat everywhere they look, what's happened is development is truncated. They're stuck. It's Groundhog Day. They are perceiving threat all the time, and they don't grow. They just are coping. They're just getting through the day. All the goodies of adulthood. The way to experience joy, peace, purpose, meaning, and love. The only place that you can have sanctuary, the only place that safety ever exists for any of you watching this for the rest of your life is here now, right here. And what you just learned is that our painful past learning history is it constantly bombarding our perceptual system, causing us to perceive threat here in this moment, where there is no danger, contaminating the sanctuary of this moment. This is what Eckhart Tolle was trying to write. Well, what he did write really nicely. He just didn't explain to us that to be able to get to the eternal now, you got to be in a regulated autonomic nervous system. You can't brute force your way here. You can only surrender your way here. I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but that's where we're going. And so that quality of life for the rest of your days is contingent upon this little piece here, is that here, now, is where your peace is. Not there then, not getting safe. And that's what so many of my clients have been all about. They've been obsessively and compulsively trying to get safe when they already are. And they can't ever get safe if they believe that safety has to be without the perception of threat. Then what you get is you get a person shrinking their life, becoming more isolatory, more and more schizoid, more and more shut down. And that's unfortunate. Okay, moving this forward. The next little gambit that I do is I ask this question. We live in the safest time in humankind's history, true or false? And you watch, it's fun to watch somebody, an audience grapple with this or an individual grapple with this, and they'll go, and it's like you can just see them kind of between their head and their gut, you know, their head, especially folks with advanced degrees, get it. Yeah, I'm not just advanced degree folks, but anybody. Yeah, that's probably true. But it doesn't feel like it. It is true. We are safer than any generation that has ever existed. We have less of a chance of one of those bad things, disease, pestilence, warfare, crime victim, natural disaster. We're more insulated from those things happening to us personally than ever before in the history of humankind. Now, that's for high and medium income countries, third world, low income countries. That's not true. But for us in the West, it is absolutely true. We've built the safest world ever for our children, and we are busy scaring them to death. Because while we're the safest generation to ever exist, we are also the most afraid. And that's something, isn't it? We are safest and simultaneously most afraid. Our grandparents had more traumatic lives. They encountered more trauma during their lives, but we are several times more traumatized than our grandparents' generation. Why? Well, some of you are already there. And if you're starting to think media, then that's precisely the reason. And what Laurie Perlman and Linda McCann, a couple of psychologists from Connecticut, in their work with vicarious trauma proved back in the late 80s, is that you don't need to survive trauma to get traumatized. All you need to do is witness it. And, you know, as we've evolved through multiple iterations of the DSM and the DSM-5, that's now become one of the ways that you can get criterion A in that, is witnessing. Don't need to experience it, just witnessing it produces traumatization. And as a species, we have never witnessed more trauma than we do in the past generation, the past 20, 25 years. And as a result of that, we've all become traumatized. We are all trauma saturated. Everybody in the United States has PTS. Now, we euphemistically, and you see where this is going, hopefully some of you are intuitive, you INFPs out there are getting this, that what we've been euphemistically calling stress is really traumatic stress. All stress is traumatic stress. It is all from painful past learning, intruding into the perception of the present, causing us to perceive threat where there is no danger. All of it. So to demonstrate this, and here's a little kind of cool way to see into this, is I say, when I'm doing this in a group, I ask, how many of you in the room have ever been attacked in a parking garage? And if somebody raises their hand, I'd ask for you to sit out of the answering of this question. If my client, I ask them, have you ever been attacked in a parking garage? And I can't remember, maybe one or two. And then I got to change it to something else. But parking garage is a really good example. And so if my client says, no, I never have, I say, so what happens when you go in a parking garage? How many of you find yourself on guard and vigilant when you go in a parking garage? Why? And this is where I unpacked, put your social scientist hat on with me for just a second. And what's happened with you is somewhere in your past, you have witnessed somebody being attacked in a parking garage. Not personal experience, witnessed experience. You saw CSI. I mean, you watch a TV show and there's a tableau of a parking garage. You know somebody's going to get got. I mean, that's just kind of the way it is. You read it in a newspaper, you had a client tell you, you had a family member who was attacked, and they told you the story. And what you took with you from that witnessed experience, you learned as your little mirror neurons created the images that you were watching or hearing. You were briefly the protagonist in that experience. And you took that, you encoded that learning. So the next time you're in that situation, you perceive threat in that situation where you've never had personal direct experience, only witnessed, you still got the traumatization. You still have now the perceived threat in future contexts that are sensorially similar to the learning. Mm-hmm. And that was witnessed. That's not even experiential. Which then, I move this straight into, which begs the question of, how many times a day do you perceive threat? And, you know, the answer that I appreciate the most is a lot. And that's true for me. I grew up in Southern West Virginia. And, you know, there's an ethos among Southern males that I ain't afraid of anything. I'm afraid of nothing. Actually, it wouldn't be anything. I ain't afraid of nothing. And, you know, I went to the ER a lot as an adolescent, proving I weren't afraid of nothing. My nose has been broken several times, proving I weren't afraid of nothing. It took me well into my 40s before I finally was able to cop to the fact that I'm afraid of everything. I'm constantly in fear, constantly throughout my day. I'm in fear. I'll leave that to work out your own algorithms on that. But I think suffice to say that it's a lot, that you're perceiving threat a lot more than you ever thought about. If you didn't know this information that I just presented to you, then you're starting to kind of go, wow, yeah, Maybe he's onto something here. What happens in the body when you perceive a threat? What physiologically? A lot of times folks in trainings will say fight or flight. Fight or flight's a behavior. There's a bunch of stuff that happens before you get to fight or flight. What are the physiological occurrences? Yeah, heart rate goes up. Respiration rate goes up simultaneously with the volume down. You breathe more rapidly but with less volume. Circulation changes, is that it goes less to the extremities, more to the center mass and large muscle groups. HPA axis engaged and blood chemistry changes. A bunch of chemicals are excreted in the bloodstream. Pupils dilate. All kinds of physiological things happen when the threat response system is activated. And then I asked this question, what happens to muscles when you perceive a threat? Yeah, they constrict. And your muscles constrict when you intentionally do manual labor. And I always say, and typing is not manual labor. When you do, physical exertive labor, your muscles constrict. When you do a workout, your muscles constrict. Those are intentional. And as soon as you're done with the workout or done with the labor, your muscles relax again. What causes muscles to constrict and stay constricted? To have sustained muscle constriction. One thing. What is that one thing? Yeah, it's perceived threat. Which then is a pretty cool way of, and this is really where everything's headed. I mean, where we're going to get to in the next capsule, when I start talking to you about how to regulate that autonomic nervous system, is developing the capacity for interoception. And interoception is biofeedback without the machine, is the ability to start to recognize when your muscles are constricted and stop constricting them. And turns out that you can't have stress in a relaxed muscle body. It's physiologically impossible. And so the more that you're able to recognize when your muscles are constricted, the more you are able to have better quality of life and be comfortable inside of your skin. It's really simple stuff. But what most of us have done our whole lives is that we have perfected somatic dissociation, that we've been perceiving threat all of our lives, and we've been in a state of discomfort our whole lives. Our body has been the place where our pain is, and what we've learned to do is to dissociate our awareness out of our bodies, to not have a felt sense, to not have interoception. And, because one day some crazy psychotherapist tells you you need to start paying attention to your body, it's a little bit, takes a little bit more discipline and effort than that. And for a lot of folks, it's challenging. So, but let me not get sidetracked and derail. What happens also now with neocortical function, with brain function? I ask when I do workshop, I ask it this way. So when we perceive a threat, does brain functioning increase or decrease? And you'll hear people go, increase, decrease. And finally somebody goes, wait, it depends on what part of the brain. And I go, ding, nice. So that when you take a scan of a person's brain who is relaxed, peaceful, satiated, comfortable, those are all synonyms for parasympathetic nervous system dominance. And when the parasympathetic nervous system is dominant, when the threat response system is not in charge, then what you see on those scans is that this area of the brain here is all lit up reds, oranges, and yellows. But at the moment that a person, that means that all the electrical energy is directed to the neocortex, frontal lobe, temporal lobe, part of your brain that does all the thinking. All of the executive functions is fully active, 100%. But at the moment that a person perceives a threat, what we've learned starts happening is that this energy gets siphoned away from the neocortex, and it gets delivered here to the brainstem, to the basal ganglia, and to the thalamus, to the reptilian brain, the threat response. And the longer that the person stays in the context of that perceived threat without intentionally relaxing the muscles of their body, the more they lose of this neocortical function. Is that a big deal? From my perspective, it may be the biggest deal. What happens in your frontal lobe? What happens in your temporal lobe? What's it do? Yeah, judgment, reasoning, fine motor control, identity, volition, impulse control, time or organization, time conceptualization, discernment, compassion, empathy, creativity, humor, just everything. It's human is diminishing while our animal is becoming more and more and more in charge. We're losing our human. That's temporary. Oh, and what about temporal lobe? Broca Wernicke's area. Broca's left frontal. Wernicke's left temporal. Language and speech. What's the media of thought? Language. And when you fully get what I'm saying here, is you start having a whole shift around how less than useful cognitive therapy is until you teach people to regulate their autonomic nervous systems. That cognitive therapy is not very useful until you help the person get their cognator back. That for 150 years we've believed that the reason why our clients are distorting perceptions of themselves in the world is because it's a software error, that they don't have the right information. And what we've been trying to do is to teach them different perceptions. And the really horrible thing about that is that if we've got a good therapeutic relationship, then what we're doing is co-regulating with our clients so they have a pretty regulated autonomic nervous system, so they get it and they have those wonderful insights in our office. And then they take them out into the world. And what happens is that now they don't have co-regulation. They don't have somebody with them to help them to be able to feel safe and to not be jacked up. And when they encounter those situations, they lose neocortical functioning and they revert back to their old behaviors and their old way of thinking. And then they come back to therapy believing that they have failed. And that irks me. It's not the failure of the client, it's the failure of the paradigm. And when you get this fully, what you see is that it is not a software problem, it's a hardware problem. And that our job as clinicians is to get our clients with fully functioning neocortices so they can think clearly, so that they can be able to stay on task, so that they can have bridge relational stuff. And instead of being in their compulsivity and need to get away or need to be aggressive, they can begin to become intentional. And the really cool thing about this, I don't know that I'll live long enough to see this happen, but it's starting to, and I've got all kinds of anecdotal experiences of it, is that when my clients begin to self-regulate, and they practice that more and more, is that cognition arights, perception arights. They start going, that doesn't make sense. And they start spontaneously changing the way that they perceive themselves in the world. Graceful and elegant instead of brute force. And that's the type of therapist I want to be, is graceful and elegant. I hope you do too. Okay, so moving forward, oops, let me get this pen. I don't know how to do that. I think I just escape. I escaped too far. So let me put that back up. And what we've been talking about is the sympathetic nervous system. to make sure that you got this, to not insult your intelligence, but to make sure that we're all on the same page here, is that human beings have an autonomic nervous system. That autonomic nervous system is bipolar and biphasic. Meaning, when one of those systems is dominant, the other is recessive. So you have sympathetic and parasympathetic. Parasympathetic, relax, comfort, satiety, peace, maximal functioning. That is the dominant nervous system for all human beings. Sympathetic is recessive. Should be. If you want to have quality of life, it should be mostly off. And there's only one thing that causes the sympathetic nervous system to turn on, and there's only one thing that causes the sympathetic nervous system to stay on. There it is, right there. Perceived threat. And when we perceive a threat, what happens is that, the anterior cingulate perceives the threat, says, "Hey, amygdala, danger, danger, danger." And the amygdala starts, the klaxons go off, and all of this physiological stuff begins to very quickly activate. So here's where in the course, there's a couple of different ways that now let's do it this way. So I ask, so why do human beings have a sympathetic nervous system? And somebody invariably says survival. And I say to that, my rejoinder is, if this workshop for 25,000 years ago, I would agree with you. Excuse me. It's not 25,000 years ago. And something appeared in the noggins of human beings 25,000 years ago that is different than all other animals. We got something that no other animal has. Well developed. Dolphins have it, primates have it, but not nearly developed as well as ours. And what is that thing? It's prefrontal cortex. Prefrontal cortex gave us a gift. And, you can look at this from God or evolution or either or neither or both, however you want to look at it. But it's a cool gift because what it's given us is we're the only animals on the planet that have the ability to discern the difference between a real versus a perceived threat. Every single other animal on the planet, when they perceive a threat, what are they compelled to do? They do not have a choice. They have to. They have to. Aggression or avoidance. They have to fight or flight. Fight or flee. They do not have a choice. We're the only ones that can sit out on our back deck, put our feet up on the stool, and drink our mint iced tea and watch the snake crawl across the patio. And just muse on, oh, that's a really beautiful animal. And don't have to do anything. We can just sit there comfortably while, for every single other animal, it's a perceived threat, and they would have to either attack that snake or run away from that snake. Don't have a choice. We're the only ones that got that choice. And that's pretty blessed. That's a cool thing. We've not grown into that very well. All you got to do is watch a little bit of CNN, and you can see how regressive we are around that. We haven't done a very good job. We got all kinds of evolutional headroom in front of us to begin to discern the difference of where is there real danger that requires my action versus where is it a perceived threat that doesn't require me to do anything. And when you can kind of look into this chasm and you can start to see that, I don't know, if we don't destroy ourselves in the next 15 or 20 years, then we got some hope for humanity around that. I get hopeful about our future. But that same gift, the prefrontal cortex, came with a curse. And the curse of the prefrontal cortex is learning. Narrative learning. And what that's meant for us is that every single painful learning experience, every single painful experience of our lives, every one of them is encoded and stored. And anytime we encounter in the future any experience that is in any way sensorially similar to that learning experience, what happens is that learning experience, now the sensory data from that learning experience and the charge that is with it, the sympathetic charge, comes forward, causing us to perceive a threat where there is no danger. How many painful learning experiences do you have in your past? Think junior high school. And just those 2 or 3 years, there were thousands. And just junior high school is all of the absolute understanding. Even if we had good attachment experiences growing up, I mean, with our primary caregivers, junior high school is going to teach all of us to perceive threat in relational contexts, because all of us got hurt a lot in that process. And that causes us to perceive threat. And a couple of interesting things about perception of threat is it bypasses the neocortex. So we're already inflamed before we even know that we're in a situation where there's perceived threat. All of this is already happening before we're even aware. It's a big deal. So 2 caveats to that. One is that I don't want to give the sympathetic nervous system a bad name. Is that it's the only bad thing about sympathetic nervous system is sympathetic dominance. Sympathetic activation, wonderful thing. That's where joy, excitement, passion, energy come from. I wouldn't want to live my life without my sympathetic nervous system, but for no animal was it ever built to stay on. You think about a gazelle getting chased by a cheetah, and you know the cheetah's chasing, and it's just about, the gazelle's doing everything it can to try to, and then the cheetah sees another one over here and starts to run after that one instead. And this gazelle then kind of runs over to a copse of trees. And 3 minutes later, 5 minutes later, less than that probably, the gazelle's grazing again. Poof, back to parasympathetic dominance. They're not on Facebook going, oh my God, you wouldn't believe the size of those teeth. None of that. We're the only animal that consistently stays in sympathetic dominance. We put ourselves intentionally in perceivedly threatening situations, real dangerous situations. Ask any law enforcement officer. The other piece of that is, I promptly forgot. Oh, darn. I know that there was something that I wanted to say. Yeah, hopefully it'll come back. But where this brings me to is to ask you the single most important question that I want to ask you during this training. Obviously, it's Socratic and rhetorical. But it's the most important question of the day. It's actually the most important question in your life, I believe. That's my bias. And that question is, what is right action? What's the right thing to do? What is the right use of your will when you perceive a threat but you're in no danger? And sometimes the answer I get is change your perception. And wouldn't that be lovely? Wouldn't it be cool to wake up in the morning and say, you know what? I'm not really going to encounter anything dangerous today. Let me just chill. How long does that last? Yeah. The reason why that's not a very good idea is because that how much threat we are perceiving, as I said earlier, that threat perception bypasses the neocortex, which means the threat response is already off and running, which means we are already losing neocortical functioning. And the neocortex, your frontal lobe, will not be retasked in the middle of a life or death situation, which is what it feels like in the context of a perceived threat, to do something as menial and unimportant as change perception. And if you do rescript it, then what happens is as soon as you lose the intention of that, it goes right back to the perception of threat again. Not a good plan. It's not efficient. It's what we've been trying to do in psychotherapy for a whole lot of years. It's really dumb. It's a bad use of resources. So what is right action? And most of you are here by now, is that you relax the muscles in your body. And you know what you get in 1 second of doing that? 1 second of confronting a perceived threat with a relaxed muscle. 1 second. Get your head fully around this. 1 second of releasing the tension of the muscles in your body while you're perceiving threat. You get to be inside of a comfortable body. You get to be comfortable. Is that valuable to you? Is that valuable to your clients? I was 40 years old before I felt what it felt like to be in a comfortable body. And it's precious to me. It's precious. It's precious to be able to sit here in front of you, being on screen, seeing myself, who I've had an antagonistic relationship with my whole life, and to be able to do that, to be able to be recorded, and seeing myself right now, perceiving the threat, and being able to be comfortable inside of my body while that's happening. That's pretty cool. I'm grateful for that. And if that's all I got for me out of self-regulation, was that I got to be comfortable inside of my skin, no matter what the external context, it would be worth the effort to get that. But that's not all I get. Is that when I am able to get and sustain, not for very long, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, a relaxed muscle body, then what also happens is that my neocortex reboots. I get back judgment, I get back reasoning, I get back humor, I get back language skills, I get back grace and elegance and fine motor control and all that cool stuff. And I am now at maximal cognitive and motor capacity. All of that comes from simply surrendering, letting go, releasing, of replacing hypervigilance with relaxed vigilance. And then the next question I ask is, okay, let's take this a step further. Somebody's got a gun to your head. What's right action? And somebody invariably says, run away. Take it away from them. And I say, absolutely. If you run away, do you want to run fast? If you are planning on taking that weapon away from them, do you want to be as agile and as strong as you can possibly be? Do you want to remember everything you've learned from Milton Erickson so you can be as manipulative as you can possibly be to talk this person out of shooting you? Wonder what you got to have, what you got to do to be able to have all of those capacities. Yeah, it's a relaxed body. And that's so counterintuitive that most people need some specialized training. They need martial arts training. They need some combat training before they start understanding that regulated autonomic nervous system is required for sustained combat, for sustained existence in real danger. And when I work with law enforcement officers, when I work with combat veterans or people who are in active combat, I always get them a copy of Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman, Grossman's book on combat. And it's a whole lot more palatable for somebody who is a warrior to hear how important it is to be in a parasympathetically dominant nervous system from another warrior than from a mental health professional. And that's what Grossman basically talks about in that book. He preaches the same gospel that I've just been talking to you about, of how important it is to be in a parasympathetically dominant nervous system when you're in combat, when you're in real danger, lest you kill yourself or your squad mates. That you are much more functional in real danger in a regulated autonomic nervous system. Now, it's not full on relaxation. It is, as I'm going to show you when we get into the next capsule, I'm going to introduce to you the Yerkes-Dodson curve, and I'm going to show you how to start to modulate that so that actual peak performance is between the two, is your ability to modulate that so that you're at peak. And it requires, almost always, very rarely in your life, if ever, does it require more energy to get to peak performance. It almost always requires dialing back down to get to peak performance. But it is the synthesis of those two. Cool. So finishing this up, if I put myself in the context of a perceived threat and I do not relax the muscles of my body, there is ultimately only, what's going to happen is that if I do not relax and I stay in the context of that perceived threat, then ultimately I am going to become compelled against my will to act out aggressively or avoidantly, fight or flight. And some people talk about freeze, and I don't want to go way into that, but freeze is not a primary response. Freeze is when freeze happens is only carved when fight or flight gets thwarted. And it can get thwarted by the environment, that the person's trapped, that they're tied down, that they're in a car, that they can't move, or they become so scared so fast that they lose neocortical functioning and they are temporarily paralyzed and can't engage. And then you get the freeze response. But fight or flight is always primary. So it will always be aggression or avoidance. That's important. So if we continue to put ourselves, let me bracket that. And I just want to give you a pictorial of what I've been talking about here for a little while. Let me get small again over here. And here is this process that I've been talking about as traumagenesis. And here it is in 3 pictures. Is that got a person who's a dog lover, and they get attacked by a dog, and then they become transgendered. No, not really. I couldn't find a picture of a woman being afraid of a dog. But now is fearful of dogs. And this is some writing that Bob and I have been doing. Bob Roten, who's my partner here at Arizona Trauma, is that when you have painful or threatening life experiences and you encode those and learn them, that what that turns into is perceived threat in future context. Now, as we've talked about, but I want to make explicit, and that's what I'm doing here, is not teach anything new, just making it explicit, is that there are 3 different ways in which that can happen. And you can survive it yourself, that's post-traumatic stress. You can witness it happening to somebody else through media or through in vivo witnessing, and that secondary traumatic stress, that's what we get, that's what causes compassion fatigue for a lot of us. And then there is a really insidious way that we can do that, is simply being around other people who are chronically dysregulated, where we are in an anxious environment and constantly being in that anxious environment because we are relational beings, because we have mirror neurons, that what's going to happen is we're going to begin to perceive threat and encode that experience as dangerous and threatening. So just ambiently, we can get traumatized. So these are the 3 pathways that infect us with trauma. So throw some words at you. Bob's son just completed this year a triple residency for pediatric psychiatry, and I can't remember what the third one was. And Bob went to go see him graduate, and they were having a discussion about sympathetic dominance, and his son said, "Oh, there's a word for that." And here's that word. I love words. So this thing that we're talking about is dysautonomia. And dysautonomia is sympathetic dominance. That's when the threat response system is on and staying on. Dysautonomia is hypervigilance, and that's bad. Sympathetic activation, though, is good, as I said earlier. This is where this gets really cool, and this is here's the birth of forward-facing trauma therapy. Here's what produced this. is that when you put yourself, when I put myself in the context of a perceived threat, I'm going to make myself big again. When I put myself in the context of a perceived threat, I'm in a hurry, and I'm trying to get somewhere, and I needed to stop at the grocery store and pick up something to take to a party or whatever else. And there is somebody in front of me that is counting pennies to give to the cashier. I am now perceiving a threat. And because this person is thwarting me getting to where I think I need to be, and if I don't get there, then because I've had painful learning of being late in other contexts of my life, then I am perceiving a threat that I'm going to be late and suffer consequences for that. As I'm sitting there in line, if I do not intentionally relax the muscles of my body, what's going to happen is that the energy is going to go up and up and up, because that's what your sympathetic nervous system does. That's what the threat response system does. Is that the longer that we're in the context of the perceived threat, the energy just keeps, it doesn't reach a place and then stop. It just keeps going up, 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 up. And look at what's happening with neocortical functioning. It's going down, 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 down. And what's going to happen is we're going to reach that place of threshold. And if I spend one more second in that situation without intentionally relaxing the muscles of my body, then no amount of devotion to the principles of compassion and kindness is going to stop me from acting out aggressively. I'm probably going to act in first. I'm going to be thinking about this person in front of me in ways that I don't want to think. I'm going to be in really critical, harsh language. And if it goes on and on and on, I'll say, come on, lady. Or do we really have to take this long? You know, I want to say something snarky. I want to do something against my principles. And I can't stop myself with brute force. I can't just, no, it'll come out. As my friends say, out of the side of my neck. And so here it is. Here's forward-facing trauma therapy. If you put yourself in the context of a perceived threat and you do not relax the muscles of your body, now no amount of devotion to a set of principles will stop you from acting out against those principles. Said a little bit differently. Any time in your life that you have ever done any behavior for which you are ashamed, you did that behavior while you were in the context of a perceived threat and you failed to relax the muscles of your body. And finally, said yet even a little bit more differently, is any time now in your past and on for the rest of your life that you breach your integrity, that you violate your principles, either by commission, which is usually aggressive, or omission, which is usually avoidance, that anytime you violate your integrity, you snarky with the person that you choose to love, you yell at your children, you fly the bird, you take shortcuts at work, whatever violations of your integrity that you engage in, every single one of those is a fight or flight behavior. And as we are able to, as we're able to teach our clients how to, but more importantly, as we ourselves learn how to confront the perceived threats of our lives in a relaxed muscle body, the first thing we get is a comfortable body that's nice. Second thing we get is we get the restoration of motor and cognitive functionings. But the third thing that we, and that's nice, and the third thing we get, though, is absolutely precious and, I think, a nexus for the change of our species, is as we are able to confront all the perceived threats of our lives in a relaxed muscle body, then that allows us to stay on the beam of our our own principles, our morality, our integrity, and that no matter who's yelling at us, no matter who's demanding what from us, no matter what our bank account says, no matter what we encounter through the day, we are able to stay the course, able to walk into those high demand situations and continue to be true to myself. The reason why your clients and you have violated your integrity is because you've walked into those situations of high demand, and what's happened is your threat response system has gone off and the energy's going up. You've lost your mohawk, you've lost your brain functioning, and you are now totally engaged in trying to get the environment different, trying to change that environment. And that is a wasted use of resources. Conversely, when you're able to bring that back to your own body and notice that your muscles are constricted and release that constriction, you're able to walk through those situations. Because what it takes to not be compulsive is you got to turn off the compulsivity engine. And the compulsivity engine is the threat response system. And how do you turn the threat response system off? You relax. When you do not have constricted muscles, you are not compelled to act in any way. You're able to just be there. And now, whoop, neocortex comes back online, which now gives you the capacity for self-reflection, which gives you language. So you can say, Eric, how do you want to be when you don't have enough money to pay the bills for this month? How do you want to be when people are being critical of you? How do you want to act in that situation? And after a decade or so of practicing this, there are 2 or 3 nights a week that I lay my head down on my pillow and go to sleep. And as I'm laying my head on my pillow and I've reviewed my day, I come up with, you know what? I didn't breach my integrity one time today. I don't know how you live a better life than that. As best I can tell, that's the top of Maslow's pyramid. I think the ability to be intentional in word and deed throughout your entire day is synonymous with self-actualization. And you want to watch your clients light up? Teach them how they can live a principle-based life. That's pretty cool. And that's what we're doing. That's what we're going to be doing as we get into the actual implementation of forward-facing trauma therapy. But let me finish this up. We're almost at the end now. I promise you. You've been patient. And this is just in pictorial and in what I just talked through. So I'm not going to spend any time on that. And this is also just kind of same thing. This is what happens when we are able to confront perceived threat with relaxed body, is that we're comfortable in our bodies without distress. Notice that we take the die out and it is stress. Mm-hmm. All stress is. Little distinction, sympathetic nervous system activation is not stress. It's just energy. It doesn't become stress until it has gone on for a while. That's when it turns into, and I don't know if you guys are ready to make this leap with me. You know what stress symptoms are? They're biofeedback. They are your system telling you that you got too much energy in your body, you need to dial it down. That is what the purpose of stress symptoms are, is that it is a dashboard light that there's too much energy. You're revving too high. That's the purpose of stress symptoms, of the distress associated with that. So these are the gifts that come from our practicing these skills. So a little bit ago, I got stuck. We did this process and kind of looked at this, and this all made really good sense, was that this caused this. Well, now hopefully you're able to see this a little bit more clearly. is that these are not causes. They are instead antecedents, triggers. What causes stress is the painful past learning associated with each one of these experiences that is intruding into the perceptual system of the present, causing there to be the perception of threat, and then the threat response system staying dominant. That's what produces these. So to say that in a little bit different way, let's say that I had a different colored thread here and traced and wrote, had these all going, oops. Well, you saw, if I affixed a different colored thread here to each one of these boxes, and we stretch that thread back over this way, or I drew arrows on the screen, then, and we let over here be your birth, and here be the present. And this was your timeline from birth to now. And if we looked through the lens of your experience all the way back through your history with finances, or if we looked at your history all the way back to your birth with job or work, or with demands, or with politics, or with health, or with traffic, or with deadlines, what we would be able to find along that thread or that line is some discrete moments of painful learning. You've had painful past learning associated with each one of these things. And so when you step into those situations, those contexts where these are at play in your present, that painful learning is intruding, and it's causing you to perceive threat where there is no danger. Just like a combat veteran that hears a loud noise and has a startle response. It is not the loud noise that causes the startle response from the combat veteran. Loud noise is going and getting the sensory memories from combat, which are then coming forward, hijacking that combat veteran's perceptual system, causing him or her in that moment with the loud noise to perceive threat where there is no danger. And that perception of threat is producing a very intense electrochemical response inside their body, producing such an intense electrochemical response it's causing involuntary muscle movement. Same is true for you. Now, when I do this in a resilience context, I do this with nurses, doctors. Every one of them hear me say this at some point. Your job is not stressful. How do you suppose nurses respond to that when I say to them that their job's not stressful? They look like Bill the cat on Far Side. But as I unpack all this stuff, they start getting it. You know, the heads start bobbing. Your job's not stressful. Your job is a haunted house. What happens is you go to work and you got all kinds of painful past learning at your workplace, from being at that workplace, from your training, from your development. There's all kinds of experiences. You got things jumping out at you all day that because of your painful past learning, you are viewing as a perceived threat. And you're not regulating when you encounter those things. You're just muscling through it. You're fighting your way through it. It's killing you. It's causing all kinds of symptoms. And that's a big deal, because when you start regulating your autonomic nervous system, you can go to work and all that stuff can happen, and you get to stay comfortable and maximally neocortical functioning, and you get to enjoy your work again. You get to rekindle mission. You get to have some excitement about it. It doesn't hurt you. It's cool. It's wonderful. And you see what this whole process has been about is shifting that locus of control from the environment causing this to my autonomic nervous system causing this distress. It's not that stuff out there. And when our clients come to see us for the first time, they are absolutely in belief. When I work with people who are burned out, they are in absolute belief that something's got to change out there before they can have quality of life. How successful are you at getting the world to bend to your will? If you're good at that, then you should be, in charge of some things. I'm not so good at it. The world just will not bend to my will. So I think maturation is about stopping trying to control things that are beyond my control and exerting energy where I have no power and keeping my focus and energy on places where I have power. And as I regulate my autonomic nervous system, I'm able to do a whole lot better job in the things that I do. Yeah, your life is not stressful. It's scary. And there's nothing I can do about that. You're going to be scared for the rest of your life. But it is my sincere hope, and when we move into this next capsule, that's what we're going to learn. It is my sincere hope that you find yourself able to be afraid in a comfortable body. That's what I try to give to my clients. So finishing all of this up is there is only one cause of stress that has been, is, or ever will be in the lives of human beings. And it is simply the perception of threat and then the subsequent autonomic nervous system dysregulation that comes from chronic perceived threat without regulation. Okay, so let's learn how to regulate that autonomic nervous system. And part of the reason how motivated are you to do that? If you've sat through this whole piece that I did on the owner's manual for the autonomic nervous system, how much motivation do you have to now want to learn to regulate that autonomic nervous system of yours? It's usually pretty high, isn't it? That's part of the reason why I teach my clients this. Instead of just teaching them the skill for self-regulation, is I want to do this it's also a motivational interviewing application. Okay, well, I'm going to take a little break and then come back and we'll do that process. And